The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78.
Chapter 43.
Stunts and Swindles. May 1st, 1998. It was happening today. Whatever it was, Harry knew. Tonks had texted him the previous evening, letting him know that she thought she knew where one of them was, and she was working on a plan to destroy it. She would let him know if they had been successful. Tonks met Narcissa and Linda in the Granger's living room at 6 in the morning. Though Tonks was fully recovered from baby Teddy's birth, she was leaving him for the first time in the care of someone else, and she was understandably nervous. The fact that he was with her mother was a comfort, at least. She had coordinated with Kingsley to ensure that his contacts with magical law enforcement were suitably distracted today, so as not to interfere with what they had to do in Diagon Alley. Additionally, she'd gotten in touch with Bill Weasley. As a curse-breaker, Bill's knowledge had been invaluable in preparing for what was to come inside Gringotts. Linda stepped out of the ground-floor guest room with uncertainty. "Are you sure this is right? Would she really wear a cloak and long sleeves? It's extraordinarily warm." Narcissa spoke up. "Yes, ever since she returned from Azkaban, she's been inordinately cold. I suppose one is never truly warm there," she said thoughtfully. "No, I don't think it's ever warm there. I've visited for work. It's quite miserable." Tonks agreed. "Goodness, the most exciting places I visit for work is the biannual dentist convention in Brighton," Linda said. 300 of the most boring individuals in Britain, all coming together to talk about the importance of flossing and the merits or the perils of fluoride." Narcissa and Tonks laughed. Tonks turned to the mirror near the front door. "All right, Aunt Narcissa, let's get my disguise ready." Tonks began to adjust the length and colour of her hair and the shape of her face to match Narcissa's instructions. Once she was a nearly perfect approximation of Rodolphus Lestrange, Tonks removed a small vial from her waistcoat. "I'll warn you, Linda, this tastes like ice warmed over. Prepare yourself," Tonks said. Linda, having never tasted ice warmed over, didn't know what to expect. But at the first gulp, she had to agree with Tonks's assessment. She grimaced and forced herself not to retch. She felt her hair lengthen and thicken, growing heavier. Her eyes became more lidded, her lips thinner. She turned to look in the mirror and found the face of Bellatrix Lestrange looking back at her. In spite of everything she had seen over the course of the last 6 years as part of the wizarding world, this was by far the strangest, she thought. "Right, let's go. Richard will be awake any minute," she said to the others. The goblins at Gringotts Bank were far more accommodating to Narcissa, Rodolphus, and Bellatrix than they had ever been to the Grangers in all their years of exchanging Muggle money for galleons at the start of the school year, Linda noticed wryly. The ride through the vaults of Gringotts was a particular treat for her, one familiar to Narcissa and, to a lesser extent, Tonks. But it was a ride that had never been taken by a Muggle before. Likewise, the Lestrange vault was filled with all manner of beautiful, priceless items. To Linda, it looked like something from a film, all gleaming and gold, dripping with jewels. Narcissa was unfazed, likely because this paled in comparison to her own vault, Linda mused. "So," Narcissa said, looking around, "we think we're looking for a cup or a tiara?" Linda frowned. She could count at least 12 tiaras without even turning her head, and the walls were lined with all manner of cups, goblets, plates, and bowls. "The tiara will likely have a sapphire in the front, and the cup will have a small badger on it." Tonks picked up a nearby cup with an elk on it. "No, not—" But her words were cut off by her shock. The The cup she had picked up suddenly glowed orange with heat, burning her hand. What's more, the little vessel began to duplicate itself, and more elk cups erupted from the original. "Imposters!" cried the goblin who had accompanied them. "Imperio!" said Tonks forcefully. She had known this was a possibility, and was ready, and had prepared her team. "That won't work in here, impostor!" the goblin shouted. From the look on Tonks's face, Linda could tell she had not expected this. If magic could not work in this vault, did they have any chance of succeeding? Thankfully, the temporary loss of her magic had not dulled the aura's reflexes. Tonks tackled the goblin to the ground, putting a knee in his back and trussing up his hands with a strip of cloth torn from the cloak she wore. Likewise, Narcissa tore a bunch of fabric from her own cloak to tie around the goblin's mouth and stop him from calling for assistance. When the goblin was subdued, Tonks reached in her bag for the essence of dittany and began applying it to her fingers. "All right. Avoid touching anything, if you can help it," Tonks said, as her wrist grazed a pewter vase on a nearby shelf. The multiplying vases clanged to the ground at her feet. "Sorry." Narcissa spotted a tiara with a large sapphire in the center, but had to pick it up to examine it. It wasn't the diadem of Ravenclaw, and the copious copies that flew from it showered Narcissa's feet. She took the dittany from Tonks and spread it on her own fingers gratefully. "The dittany will work less and less, the more injuries we receive," Tonks said. "We have to be judicious about what we touch." "Girls, what about this?" Linda asked, pointing. On a top shelf in the corner of the room sat a small, unassuming golden cup. It was set apart from the other goblets and the cups in the room, and Tonks instantly recognized it from the painting of Helga Hufflepuff in their common room. "That's it!" Tonks cried. "Accio cup!" The cup did not budge. Tonks had expected this as well, but had to try. "Can you levitate me up there?" Linda asked Tonks. This was attempted and failed. "Right. Girls, we're about to attempt something that I haven't done since my days in cheer club at the U of Portsmouth." Linda blew out a breath, feeling Bellatrix's coarse, dark hair resettle on her forehead. "So, first, the two of you will face each other and get in a lunge position. We'll start with a thigh stand." 15 minutes later, after much trial and error on the three women's parts, Tonks and Narcissa had managed to get Linda to stand on Narcissa's shoulders without touching too many more items in the vault. Linda had torn most of the ridiculous skirt away to allow herself to move more freely. Hopefully, once they left the vault, Narcissa or Tonks could transfigure it into something more reasonable. Tonks was the first to spot a problem, as she spotted her Muggle friend. "Linda, not to doubt you or anything, but, how are you going to get down?" "Let me worry on it," Linda said through gritted teeth as she further engaged her core to stand steady on the quaking Narcissa's shoulders. "Just a bit more left, Sissa. There, I've got it. Right, toss it down to me before it burns you too badly," Tonks called to her, holding her hands out to catch. It's not burning me," Linda said in confusion, as she held the cup carefully. "Why isn't it burning me?" "Never mind that right now. When are you getting down?" an anguished Narcissa asked from below her. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Right. Give me your hands." Linda reached down for Narcissa's hands, but Narcissa did not move. "I can't," Narcissa whispered fearfully. Linda nodded, gathering her courage. "Right. Hold very still, then. I'm going to push off of you." "You're going to what?" Narcissa asked, but the question was answered almost immediately, as Linda bent her knees and jumped, tucking and rolling as she hit the ground, then jumping to her feet. It was unpracticed, and she was no longer in the shape she'd been in at 19, but for someone that hadn't done anything like that in well over 20 years, She'd managed the landing well. Tonks and Narcissa stood slack-jawed. "Well, fuck, that was amazing," Tonks finally said. "We should go. I might not be able to move in about 10 minutes, Linda said urgently. Narcissa was confused. "But how are you still holding that cup? Everything in the room has a flagrante and a Dramione curse on it." "Perhaps it's just the cup," Tonks said, gripping one handle of the cup. Immediately, the young witch's hand was singed, and more Hufflepuff cups flowed from the original. She let go quickly. On a whim, Linda touched the pewter vase that Tonks had touched earlier. Nothing happened. The three women looked at each other in confusion, but it was the rapidly bouncing goblin that broke the silence with his grunting, clearly wishing to speak. Narcissa leaned down and lowered the piece of fabric from the goblin's mouth. "This woman, disguised as Bellatrix Lestrange, is a Muggle, obviously," the goblin said smugly, as though this explained everything. "What does that have to do with anything?" Tonks asked. "This woman," the goblin looked pointedly at Narcissa, "is a witch, but not a Lestrange. You look like a Lestrange, but your own magical identity is still your own. This woman has no magical signature of her own, and so the vault only recognizes the physical touch of its owner, Mrs. Lestrange." "Wow," said Tonks. "Doesn't seem very secure, in retrospect, does it?" "It does not," the goblin agreed reluctantly. Narcissa smiled kindly at him. "You've been quite helpful to us today, Lagnold. Don't worry, we'll send an anonymous owl to the bank next week to make sure they know you're in here." "We're leaving him in here?" Linda asked in horror. "He'll sound the alarm. We can't take any chances," Narcissa said reasonably. "Come, it's time to go." They had the goblin put his hand against the door to open it, but realized almost instantly that there was a problem. A loud klaxon alarm was sounding in the cavernous bank. In the distance they could make out loud voices yelling about intruders. Lagnold smiled nastily. "Sounds like it's time to stay." Linda put a hand in her pocket, turning menacingly towards the goblin. "I don't think so. Lagnold, was it? Do you know what a Muggle gun does? Because I just so happen to have one here in my pocket, and it's pointed at your head." Indeed, from the skirts of her ripped dress, one could make out the barrel of a gun. "Here's what you're going to do, Lagnold. We're going to pretend that we are innocent victims here, just trying to leave. You're going to take us back to the bank lobby and escort us out the front door and into the street. We'll disapparate and let you go. But one false move and—" She drew a line across her throat. "No more Lagnold." And so they did. Once out of the vault, Tonks quickly repaired Linda's skirt, and Linda held the cup securely inside her other pocket. Lagnold haughtily informed the other goblins they passed that he was escorting Mrs. Malfoy and the Lestranges out of danger, and they reached the street without incident. Tonks stood between the other two women and turned on the spot with them, landing in the living room of the home she shared with Remus. "Linda, that was amazing! I'm so glad you thought to bring a gun!" Tonks exclaimed, as the three of them breathed a sigh of relief. Linda sheepishly removed her hand from her pocket, where her middle and index finger still formed the gun barrel shape. "Me too!" Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.